South Gyeongju.
The moment we wear it, our spirits lift. It helps us grow strong in body and in mind. As we wear it, we learn patience and respect. The belt system motivates students to strive harder and continue growing. This uniform shapes movement into grace and turns performance into something thrilling. Now, embraced around the world, Taekwondo shares our culture, philosophy, and values with pride and spirit. Though it may seem simple, this uniform holds your passion and your journey. It belongs to Taekwondo. Wear the extraordinary. Be with Taekwondo.
South Korean officials are heading back to the U.S. for another round of tariff negotiations with the U.S. to resolve remaining issues and strike a deal that serves the national interest, just in time for the APEC leaders meeting next week. And ahead of the APEC meeting, North Korea launched its first ballistic missiles in 5 months on Wednesday morning, seen as its latest attempt to get U.S. recognition of it as a nuclear-armed state. South Korea's intel agency has identified the key suspect in the death of a South Korean college student in Cambodia, the victim of a job scam, as an accomplice in a major drug case in central Seoul in 2023. One more round of tariff talks between Seoul and Washington is taking place to finalize South Korea's $350 billion investment in the U.S., now preferably on the occasion of the upcoming APEC leaders meeting. Our Kim Bo-kyung leads us tonight.
Presidential Chief of Staff for Policy Kim Yong-bum and Industry Minister Kim Jong-kwan departed for Washington, D.C. on Wednesday once again for tariff negotiations with the U.S. It has only been a few days since the two officials returned from earlier trips to D.C., during which they talked to U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick to finalize the details of the $350 billion investment package. Before heading out to the U.S., they told reporters they were going there to discuss one or two remaining issues.
It looks like we'll be tense until the very end. We'll do our best to make sure our national interests are protected until the last moment.
When it comes to the possibility of reaching the agreement by the upcoming summit between Presidents Yi and Trump that will be held in line with the APEC leaders meeting, the Presidential Chief of Staff for Policy said the government is not considering signing an MOU based only on a partial agreement while leaving key issues unresolved just because of the event. If the trade agreement does get reached, other results that were made during the previous summit between the two leaders would also be able to be announced, as they could not be unveiled due to unresolved parts related to trade at that time.
If the trade MOU and related issues are finalized, the trade results will be announced too. I also expect that many of the key achievements tentatively agreed at the Washington summit can be made public together.
He added that security and other issues are being coordinated by National Security Advisor Ri Sung-rak at the National Security Office. Meanwhile, the impact of U.S. tariffs is starting to show in Korea Customs Service data, with exports to the U.S. for the first 20 days of October plunging 24.7% compared to the previous year. Even considering there were 2 less working days during this period, exports to the U.S. were still down more than 10%. Total exports to all countries from October 1st to 20th totaled $30.15 billion, down 7.8% from the same period last year, largely due to that fall in exports to the U.S. 김보경, Arirang News.
In the meantime, U.S. President Donald Trump continues to show optimism and confidence on what he calls a fair trade deal with China on the sidelines of APEC, referring to trade negotiations with South Korea, Japan, and the European Union. Lee Seung-jae reports.
U.S. President Donald Trump has expressed optimism about upcoming trade negotiations with China, saying he expects to meet Chinese President Xi Jinping in South Korea soon to discuss a wide range of issues. Speaking at a White House luncheon on Monday, President Trump said he believes the two countries will do well in the talks. The remarks come as President Trump moves to impose an additional 100% tariff on Chinese goods starting November 1st. If implemented, the overall tariffs that China must pay on exports to the United States could climb as high as 157%. The measure follows Beijing's decision to tighten export controls on rare earth materials, which Washington sees as a strategic challenge to global supply chains. Despite the rising trade tensions, Trump emphasized that he maintains a good personal relationship with President Xi and expects to reach what he described as a fair deal. He said he hopes both sides can benefit, but stressed that any deal must be fair. The U.S. leader added that a meeting with President Xi would be very successful, noting that global attention is focused on the upcoming talks. Still, Trump acknowledged that there remains a chance that the meeting might not happen, saying that if someone were to call it off, it would not be due to hostility, but rather part of the business process. Meanwhile, Trump also highlighted what he views as the broader success of his tariff policies, saying Washington has done well in trade negotiations with South Korea, Japan, and the European Union. He argued that the use of tariffs has strengthened America's negotiating position, helped reduce trade deficits, drawn in new foreign investments, and boosted domestic manufacturing. Pundits say Washington is aiming to use this combination of high tariffs and direct diplomacy to pressure Beijing into concessions, while reassuring allies that Washington remains committed to fair and reciprocal trade. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Japan's new Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi says she would like to meet with President Jae Myung and continue developing future-oriented ties. This came on Tuesday as she held her first press conference upon taking office.
I would like to see Japan and South Korea develop a future-oriented and stable relationship. I hope to hold talks with the president. I love Korean food. I use Korean cosmetics. I watch Korean dramas. And should a chance to meet the president arise in future, I will gladly take it.
She also underscored trilateral cooperation with Seoul and Washington in responding to North Korea, while voicing expectations ahead of the APEC leaders meeting in Gyeongju next week, which would be her first major multilateral stage. Takaichi further expressed appreciation for Korean culture. The message contrasts sharply with her past hardline stance on historical and territorial disputes and her controversial visit to the Yasukuni Shrine honoring Japan's Class A war criminals. Now, at home, she has vowed swift measures against inflation and appointed several conservative figures to her first cabinet. North Korea resumed its missile provocations on Wednesday morning by launching a series of short-range ballistic missiles. For the first time in nearly half a year, our Kim Do-yeon has the details.
North Korea fired short-range ballistic missiles at around 8:10 a.m. on Wednesday, its first launch of this kind in more than 5 months. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said the missiles were launched from the regime's Hwanghae-bukdo province just south of Pyongyang and traveled approximately 350 kilometers northeast. According to local reports, the missiles are believed to have fallen on land rather than in the sea. This marks North Korea's first ballistic missile provocation since President Jae Myung took office in early June. The JCS said it has shared intelligence on the launch with the U.S. and Japan, and that Seoul's military is maintaining a full readiness posture. The presidential office also stated that the National Security Council held an emergency military readiness review to assess the launch's impact. It added that the government will closely monitor the North for additional launches and review necessary measures. The provocation comes ahead of the APEC leaders meeting in South Korea next week, which U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping are scheduled to attend. Experts say the launch was a message of pressure aimed at the U.S.
When the North Korea issue is discussed during the APEC period, Pyongyang's message is that the denuclearization issue is absolutely impossible. This also contains a message of pressure toward the U.S., telling America to come forward while remembering demands for the suspension of ROK U.S. military drills and the recognition of its nuclear status.
The launch also comes 12 days after a military parade in Pyongyang to mark the 80th anniversary of the Workers' Party, where it showed off its arsenal, including its latest ICBM, which experts say can be tested soon as well. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Amid ongoing security threats posed by North Korea's weapons of mass destruction and the regime's cooperation with Russia, NATO's deputy chief this week attended South Korea's massive air defense exhibition and met with key security officials. She also sat down with Arirang News for this exclusive interview. Here's our Oh Soo-young with more.
Your Excellency, Deputy Secretary General of NATO, Radmila Shekerinska, thank you so much for joining us today.
Good evening. Nice to be here.
We're living at a time when the United States is calling on its allies to step up, invest more in defence and pay more for their own security. How does a partnership with South Korea contribute to that effort for NATO?
You're absolutely right. There were strong calls from various sides within the alliance that we need to spend more on our defense, because in the present changed global security environment, we need to invest more. We have seen a more aggressive Russia. We have seen the threat that Russia poses to almost all of their neighbors. And it was very important that NATO keeps the technological edge, keeps the military advantages that we have always had. And for this, we need to invest more. We won't change the defense spending overnight, but some of the allies have actually moved to almost 5% even as we speak. And this shows a clear sense of leadership and purpose. We are also investing a lot in our innovation, because spending this money has to come up in parallel with more research and development, more innovation, and adding this innovation into defense and military capabilities. And this is also an area in which we do cooperate with our partners, and we value very much the cooperation that we had with the Republic of Korea. We cooperate in issues such as space, cyber. We cooperate on the usage of artificial intelligence in defense. All these issues contribute to countries being able to spend more, but also being competent and ready to spend better and smarter.
North Korea showcased new intercontinental ballistic missiles equipped with solid fuel engines along with hypersonics last week at this massive military parade that they had. And interestingly, it was attended by Russia's Security Council Deputy President. And what kind of growing threats do the allies face when it comes to Moscow and Pyongyang's military and technological cooperation?
The security of the Euro-Atlantic influences the security in the Indo-Pacific and vice versa. But we have seen these theaters even more interconnected after the Russian war against Ukraine. Seeing North Korean troops present there and fighting on behalf of Russia was, I think, a very clear signal to a much, much deeper and stronger military cooperation between Russia and DPRK. What was visible on the battlefield became visible also in other fields. So it was clear that North Korea is profiting from experience in war fighting, lessons in strategy in this new, let's say, warfare, but also from technology transfer. And this practically deeper military cooperation is a source of concern on both sides, in the Euro-Atlantic, but also in the Indo-Pacific. And this is why the security is now very rarely seen just in regional context, but much more globally. But this is also one of the reasons due to which our cooperation with the partners in the Indo-Pacific is crucial, is necessary, and it's beneficial for both.
North Korea is definitely profiting from Russia's ongoing invasion of Ukraine. But at the same time, though, North Korean regime leader Kim Jong-un has pretty much signaled that he's ready to talk with US President Donald Trump. From a Euro-Atlantic perspective, what kind of progress do you hope to see if this high-profile meeting happens?
Well, have no doubts. NATO, in essence, is a defensive alliance. So we have always supported efforts to reach peace agreements, and we have been very supportive to a dialogue on difficult issues. We have supported US President Trump's efforts to broker a peace agreement, or initially a ceasefire, between Russia and Ukraine, and we have continued our support to Ukraine throughout this period so that Ukraine can negotiate from a position of strength. And this is why we believe that it is our duty to help Ukraine in this fight, but our goal is to help Ukraine get to the negotiating table and ensure a sustainable, lasting peace. So this is our policy when it comes to all conflicts. This is our policy when it comes to issues of global security.
Your trip to the Republic of Korea falls upon Seoul's annual Aerospace and Defense Exhibition, ADEX 2025. What's been most interesting for you so far, and what do you hope to gain from your visit?
Actually, I was really impressed by not only the potential of the Korean defense industry, but also by the strong links that they have with a number of NATO allies and companies within NATO countries. So it's not something that has never existed. It is something that is ongoing, and I think that there is satisfaction on both sides. But as we said at the meetings with ministers and Korean colleagues, we can always do better, and we can really increase this cooperation for the benefits of both Korea, but also NATO.
Thank you very much for your time today and for making time for Arirang, Madam Deputy Secretary General.
Thank you, and I really appreciate your interest.
South Korea's National Intelligence Service has uncovered a link between a Korean student's murder in Cambodia and a 2023 Gangnam drug scandal. Our Park Junan has the latest.
The National Intelligence Service confirmed on Wednesday that the main suspect in the brutal killing of a South Korean university student in Cambodia was an accomplice of the mastermind behind the 2023 Gangnam drug drink scandal, where South Korean minors were targeted with a so-called drug drink made by mixing methamphetamine with milk. Regarding organized crime, the intelligence agency also dispatched a rapid response team to Cambodia earlier this month under the directive of President Jae Myung, who ordered the agency to eradicate the scam network completely, no matter what it takes. The agency also estimates that between 1,000 and 2,000 South Koreans are involved in romance scam crimes occurring in Cambodia. On the same day, an on-site government audit was held at the Korean embassy in Cambodia. The embassy reported to the National Assembly Foreign Affairs and Unification Committee that around 100 abduction and confinement cases remain unresolved out of 550 reported over the past 2 years. While 450 victims were rescued or released, cases surged from less than 20 in 2023 to 220 in 2024 and 330 by August 2025. Lawmakers from South Korea criticized the embassy's response to the abduction and confinement crimes targeting Koreans and urged a thorough response. On the judicial side, a Seoul court found 3 South Koreans guilty of luring a friend to a Cambodian voice phishing group. The main suspect received a 10-year prison term for orchestrating the victim's 20-day captivity, during which his bank account was exploited for fraud. Two accomplices were sentenced to 5 years and 3.5 years, respectively. The victim, deceived by their false promises, was rescued by South Korean embassy staff in Cambodia. The South Korean authorities are sparing no effort in a crackdown on these transnational crimes, as they are actively collaborating with the Cambodian police and international agencies to rescue victims and dismantle the criminal networks. Park Jun-han, Arirang News.
Seoul is hosting its annual Semiconductor exhibition, offering a comprehensive look at chip technology at the very core of the AI era. Our Moon Ji-young was there with this report.
In the midst of a paradigm shift driven by AI, the future competitiveness of the semiconductor ecosystem is becoming increasingly crucial. Against this backdrop, marking its 27th anniversary, the Semiconductor exhibition commenced in Seoul on Wednesday, showcasing the entire spectrum of the semiconductor industry's supply chain. In the AI era, with semiconductor technology at the core, this year's event highlights a seamless integration of Korea's semiconductor ecosystem, design, manufacturing, and post-processing. Samsung Electronics unveiled a physical HBM4, a 6th-generation high-bandwidth memory chip. The company has not only completed development of its 12-layer HBM4, but is also actively accelerating preparations for mass production. Furthermore, Samsung showcased its broad portfolio, ranging from the 7th-generation GDDR7 graphics DRAM, currently supplied in large volumes to NVIDIA, to advanced system semiconductors and foundry services. Meanwhile, another industry leader, SK hynix, prominently positioned its HBM4 exhibition at the booth center. Notably, the company had already supplied HBM4 samples to key customers such as NVIDIA as early as March, outpacing its competitors. It also introduced innovative memory module solutions specifically optimized for data centers and AI servers, alongside advanced storage solutions tailored for AI data centers and cloud infrastructure. Beyond these industry giants, Family's firms showcase their latest innovations, including intellectual property technology, logic processing units, and vehicle-to-infrastructure solutions. Furthermore, domestic materials, parts, and equipment companies demonstrated their advanced manufacturing technologies, underpinning the entire semiconductor production process. Running through this Friday, the show brings together 280 global semiconductor manufacturing and equipment companies exhibiting across 700 booths and is expected to attract more than 60,000 industry professionals. Moon Ji-young, Arirang News.
A design event in its 12th year is transforming Seoul's Dongdaemun Plaza into a hub of creativity, offering visitors and fans of design the chance to experience how design connects daily life with art and innovation. Our Pyonhae Young has more.
At one of Seoul's most iconic landmarks, creativity fills every corner. From experimental furniture to pop-up markets and AI-themed conferences, Seoul Design Week 2025 at Dongdaemun Design Plaza is where the city's design spirit comes alive. The festival brings together exhibitions, talks, and visitor-driven programs under the theme Design, Designer, Design Life. The week-long event, held until October 26, explores how design can be found in every aspect of life.
Seoul is known as one of the world's trendiest cities. We are establishing ourselves as category creators, pioneers who set new trends. Just as K-pop became its own global genre, I hope Seoul's design will emerge as a genre of its own.
That vision is reflected across the week's programs, where design is not only displayed, but lived.
This is Seating Seoul, where 100 designers have reimagined the simple chair. The exhibition suggests that chairs can reflect our bodies, lifestyles, and even our society.
At the visitor-favorite design fair, Seoul Design Week features popular lifestyle brands like Finca and 60 Seconds, while the Design Conference gathers creators and scholars to discuss AI, sustainability, and the future of aesthetics. For emerging designers, the event also offers a chance to collaborate with major companies, giving those with limited funding the opportunity to bring their creative ideas to life. That's what the Young Designers Special Exhibition is all about. The design fair is also a space for introspection.
I think this fair isn't just about showing our products to other people. It's about reflecting on how we see and interpret the world as designers.
Beyond form and function, Seoul Design Week places people at the center of creativity.
This year's Seoul Design Week focuses on design embedded in daily life, spotlighting both the creators and the consumers who appreciate with a designer's mindset.
From chairs that tell human stories to conferences that envision the future of creativity, Seoul Design Week 2025 shows that design is a living language of how Koreans express their culture to the world. Hyun-yeong, Arirang News.
The early winter cold has receded. The air became warmer in the afternoon and gradually recovered to the average temperature for this time of year. Chilly mornings followed by cool afternoons, which are typical for the season, will continue until the weekend. The sky is mostly cloudy, but there is still rain forecast on the East Coast. Rain will continue on and off until Saturday. In addition, the wind is still strong along the coast. The waves will also be very high due to the wind. Please take extra precautions. Tomorrow morning, temperatures will start off in the double digits everywhere, with Seoul, Daegu, and Gyeongju at 12 degrees. Daily highs will get up to 19 degrees in Seoul and Gyeongju, 20 degrees in Daejeon and Daegu. After the weekend, it will get cold again starting from next week. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Dami. From all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.
How to survive in Korea. One room. So, you're surviving in Korea if you've signed a contract for a one room, obviously you're a pro. But the real deal begins now. Step 1. Housewarming. No need to buy toilet paper, diffusers or hand soap. You'll get them soon enough as housewarming gifts. And some are bound to pile up. There's nothing better to serve your guests than milpaeyu nabe. If you have Korean friends coming over, don't forget the extra garlic. Step 2. Garbage disposal. With great power comes great responsibility. You've had a good time, so let's get to work. It might be tempting to sweep everything into a trash can, but you have to separate your garbage. Not bothered? Beware that negligence is punished with a fine or public humiliation. Step 3. Drying rack. You're excited to live alone in Korea, but the fate of these items, hanger, storage, or a hanger. Go get fresh coffee outside. Jogging doesn't cost anything, and nothing beats instant rice. But keep one item around so that you don't get too lonely. Step 4. Pros of living alone. No mum. Cons of living alone. No mum. A new towel doesn't magically appear. You have to do the laundry regularly. If anyone gives a towel as a souvenir, take it. Get rid of mold immediately. Don't be lazy with the vacuum cleaner. Housework is an endless affair. Overwhelmed? Give your mum a call and thank her for everything she's done. Did you survive in your one room? Wait, you have an unwanted visitor. Call someone you fancy. Could be the right person for the job.
도시는 세계와 연결되어 문화를 창조했고 새로운 것을 받아들였다.
함께여서 우리는 더 자유롭고 더 멀리 갈 수 있어.
닫힌 문이 아니라 열린 질문으로.
나에게 APEC은
자유,
융합,
국제성,
다양성, 포용,
개발.
신라의 정신이 APEC 2025로 이어집니다.
Lair of the Peak.
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gen. As the APEC leaders meeting in Gyeongju kicks off soon in South Korea, diplomatic activity is accelerating on all fronts. U.S. President Donald Trump is turning up the heat on Beijing with a new rare earth deal with Australia, signaling sharper pressure ahead of possible talks with President Xi Jinping. There's even speculation about a surprise meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un at Panmunjom. Meanwhile, Seoul prepares for back-to-back summits with both Washington and Beijing, all as Japan enters a new political chapter with hardline conservative Sanai Takaichi now in office. With overlapping flashpoints and fast-moving shifts, the Lee administration's practical diplomacy is about to face one of its toughest tests yet. For more on this, we connect to Andrew Millard, Assistant Professor of International Relations at Changwon National University. Big welcome.
Good evening. How are you?
Thank you for joining us. And also joining us is Hannah Kim, Associate Professor at Seogang University's GSIS. Good to see you, Professor.
Thanks for having me again.
So let's start a discussion with Professor Millard. So like I said, President Trump has decided to strengthen cooperation with Australia on rare earths and critical minerals in response to China's tighter export controls. Some people view this as a strategic move to raise pressure ahead of the possible U.S. China talks at the APEC. How do you read into this?
So I think definitely if we look at the timing, just right before APEC, we could say this is quite strategic. But actually, this has been sort of in the process, in the works for quite a few years, even going back to Donald Trump's first term in office. He's been talking about rare earths with Australia since back then. But I think it's first very important that we really understand what we mean by these rare earths and why they're so important. So rare earths, really, they're incredibly important for advanced technological manufacturing. So that covers everything from solar panels to semiconductors, weapons, magnets for electric vehicle engines, aircraft parts, and so on and so forth. So they're really very, very important. And actually, if you look at the countries which have rare earth deposits around the world, there's quite a few countries, the U.S, China, Vietnam, Brazil, Ukraine, Australia. There's quite a few. The problem comes right now with the fact that even those countries which have deposits, mining and getting the deposits out and then processing these deposits is very difficult. Now, this is really where China has the lead. Over the past few years, China's been investing huge amounts of money into these processing techniques. And this is where now really they kind of monopolize the rare earths global market. In terms of global production, China alone stands at about 65–70%. When it comes to the processing, China alone is about 90% of the global rare earths market. So they have a huge leverage. And just last week, China introduced this new export rule, this new condition. Any foreign company, and I guess also Chinese company in China, wanting to export rare earths out of China, now they must get permission from the government. And in order to get permission, they have to explain where these rare earths are going to be used, how they're going to be used. It must be for civilian use only. So against this backdrop, this is really where this US-Australia deal really comes into play. This is the US trying to say to China, look, okay, you have right now the techniques, you are processing, but we're looking at these other countries, we're investing in these other countries. So in the future, we might be behind right now, but we're going to very quickly catch up to you.
Right. So a message towards China that the U.S. could have an alternative when it comes to rare earths. That seems to be the message. Now, amid this, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Chinese Vice Premier Hao Lifeng are expected to meet in a few days. And the two previously played key roles in brokering a trade truce during the tariff war. Now, Professor Kim, do you think this meeting could signal any improvement in the relationship between the two?
I think it's possible that this meeting could bring a temporary easing of tensions. This meeting is taking place at a time when trade tensions have again spiked. As Professor Millard mentioned, there have been issues related to rare earth and rare earth export controls, but there have also been issues related to renewed tariff threats. So the fact that both sides may potentially be engaging indicates a willingness to keep channels open. In addition to that, with global supply chains under strain and both economies facing external pressure, there is a strong incentive for both sides to avoid escalation. But at the same time, we should not expect a fundamental breakthrough. I think it will be temporary, if anything. There are still many structural and strategic issues that remain unresolved. Also, meetings don't always equal deliverables. And in addition to that, their trust just between the two countries right now remains weak. So, as I mentioned earlier, both Washington and Beijing currently have strong domestic incentives to stabilize their relationships, at least tactically. For the United States, the administration faces election year pressures and wants to avoid new economic shocks or escalation that could unsettle markets. And for China, domestic growth remains sluggish. Foreign investment confidence is low, and Beijing seeks a more predictable external environment to manage its economy. So in this context, what we are likely to see is a managed détente, which is limited cooperation on trade or financial coordination without resolving the structural rivalry between the two powers. And the underlying strategic competition, which is rooted in technology, security, and ideology, will remain intact. So the meeting may produce symbolic gestures of goodwill, but the fundamental dynamics of U.S. China competition are likely to persist beneath the surface.
Right, definitely. It's a very complex issue indeed. Now, what's also caught attention is President Trump reconfirming his plans to meet with President Xi in South Korea. And he said, quote, fantastic deal could be reached between the two. If the U.S. China summit takes place, then what kind of variables could shape its outcome, Professor Millard?
You're right. Donald Trump calls this a fantastic deal. I think for Donald Trump, every deal is fantastic or historical or the best deal ever. I'm not sure we should read too much into that wording. But definitely, I do agree if there is some sort of deal between the US and China, this can only be win-win for everybody, just because there is a lot of global uncertainty right now. And as these two superpowers, if they're sort of trading off with each other, then it affects everybody. But as Professor Kim mentioned just before, for some of the variables, I think domestic variables with both China and the US will play quite a big role in this. So for the United States, Donald Trump really right now, his domestic ratings, they're starting to drop down. There's lots of protests against him. Farmers are protesting against him. So he really needs to have some sort of a positive deal that affects Americans. So he's coming off a high with the peace deal in Gaza, but that doesn't affect Americans directly. So if he can have some sort of positive tariff deal with China that lowers food prices, lowers prices in America, I think that'll be a big boost for him. And also for China, right now the economy is not doing that well. So I think any sort of deal where Xi Jinping can again sort of re-energize the Chinese market, open the Chinese market and sort of maintain that resilience could be very good. But there's lots of variables. So in terms of the economic concessions, how far are the US and China willing to go? Are they both going to come in and play hardball, or do they really want some sort of deal? So that's really yet to be seen. But like I said, really for the US, agriculture could be quite a big part of this. Really, it's a very bad sector at the moment. Security issues. So if there's some sort of incident in Asia, this could put a spanner in the works, as we say. So just today, we've seen North Korea for the first time in months testing ballistic missiles. How will this change things? But staying with North Korea, I think this is where maybe China could play a role. So we know that Donald Trump covets these sort of peace deals, and he does want to have a meeting with Kim Jong-un. But I think he will need Chinese support to make this happen. So this is maybe where I think we could see some sort of negotiations take place.
Room for negotiations, since it's all intertwined, of course. Now, since Professor Millard spoke about North Korea, there is actually growing speculation that President Trump could meet leader Kim Jong-un at the possibly Panmunjom during the APEC season. Professor Kim, how realistic do you think is a revival of U.S.-North Korea talks? And yeah, what's your speculation?
I mean, it is difficult to rule out the possibility entirely, especially given President Trump's unpredictable and impulsive style. Talks could possibly take place at Panmunjom, as you mentioned, and we've seen it before. In 2019, Trump made an unplanned symbolic meeting with Kim Jong-un, and that at Panmunjom that caught everyone, even his own aides, by surprise. And even recently, Trump has repeatedly expressed his willingness to meet Kim again, supposedly without any preconditions. And in addition to that, Pyongyang has also acknowledged that Kim and Trump have a good personal rapport. So that being said, the prospects for a real revival of the U.S.-North Korea talks remains uncertain. North Korea continues to insist that any dialogue must exclude denuclearization as a precondition, while the United States cannot easily accept that without facing domestic political backlash. And in addition to this, even from a practical standpoint, Trump is only going to be here for approximately 2 days, which is a very short period of time. And there seems to be much more of a focus on the meeting with Xi Jinping at APEC more than anything else. So, while a photo opportunity or a symbolic exchange at Panmunjom during the APEC cannot be ruled out, a substantive breakthrough is highly unlikely. Both sides might find short-term political value in showing openness, but the structural gap in expectations, especially over the nuclear issue, makes real negotiations difficult to resume at this stage.
Right,
at
definitely. This stage. Since there's the core condition of accepting North Korea as a nuclear state. Like Professor Millard said, North Korea has launched a ballistic missile, which is its first since the Lee administration took office. And it comes, of course, the timing is really important, roughly days ahead of the APEC leaders meeting and President Trump's visit to Seoul. Professor Kim, what do you make of this timing? What could they be sending a message?
Yeah, so Professor Miller mentioned this as well, but North Korea did fire ballistic missiles, and it's the first test in 5 months and the first since the Jae Myung administration took office in June. In addition to that, these ballistic missiles were launched 1 week before the 2025 APEC summit and before U.S. President Donald Trump and other leaders are coming to APEC. So in this context, the timing is clearly deliberate. It seems as though Pyongyang is sending a political signal, though more than anything else, more than being as a military threat. North Korea has often conducted missile launches ahead of major diplomatic events like this one, whether U.S.-South Korea summits were taking place or there were regional meetings. And it's essentially a way to remind Washington of its presence and to strengthen its bargaining position. Given that this was a short-range missile, it doesn't appear that Pyongyang intends to upend the entire strategic balance or provoke a direct confrontation. But it is a calibrated move designed to capture attention ahead of President Trump's visit and the APEC summit. Essentially, North Korea is saying, hey, don't ignore us. We're still here, and it's a way of asserting relevance at a moment when global focus is shifting elsewhere. So Pyongyang wants to ensure that any future U.S. engagement, if it happens, takes place on its own terms and not as an afterthought.
Right. Professor Kim, thank you for the analysis. Let's switch gears a little bit. So the Trump administration ahead of APEC is reportedly also replacing its acting ambassador to South Korea. Kevin Kim, Deputy Assistant Secretary for East Asian and Pacific Affairs, is being mentioned as a possible successor. So with Trump's visit approaching, what is behind this sudden change, Professor Millard?
So I think this change, it's caught a few people off guard. It's not a surprise that he's going to change the ambassador, because the previous one, Joseph Yoon, the current, for a couple more days, he was nominated by President Biden back in January as the interim ambassador. So it's no surprise that there's going to be a change. And Kevin Kim generally is seen as someone who is much more pro-Trump. So that's not surprising. But again, the timing is a little bit surprising. I mean, what we can say is that Kevin Kim, he's generally considered sort of an expert in Korea. He's of Korean descent. He was involved in the summits back in Singapore, in Hanoi, and also the meeting between Kim and Trump back in Panmunjom. So he does have a lot of experience in Korea, and he's sort of one of those guys who's generally going to push for having some sort of US-North Korea negotiation. So it definitely looks like this is the direction that America is going to push it. Donald Trump does really want to have some sort of meeting with Kim Jong-un. Whether that's at APEC or not, we don't know. But definitely this new appointment does really enforce that idea of stronger relations in the future.
Right. And amid this, there's also talks about a possible, of course, a U.S. South Korea-U.S. agenda, the bilateral summit between the two. And there's been word of real progress in tariff negotiations, which had previously stalled. Professor Kim, do you think a deal could be finalized during the APEC? And what do you think we should be watching for?
It's certainly possible that a tariff deal could be announced, but I wouldn't call it final. With President Trump, no agreement is ever truly settled until he personally reaffirms it. And sometimes even after that, it can change. So, it's hard to say at the moment, but this pattern is not unique to Korea. We've seen it similar reversals with U.S. trade partners like Canada, Japan, and the European Union. So for Seoul, this makes negotiations extremely challenging. At the same time, this is also an opportunity for Seoul. In the past, U.S. negotiating teams reached preliminary understandings with foreign counterparts, only to have Trump demand tougher terms afterwards. So as a result, many negotiators learned to aim higher to craft deals that could secure Trump's explicit approval. On balance, a direct meeting with Trump himself during APEC offers both risk and opportunity. It's risky because commitments can shift overnight, but it's also an opportunity for Korea to make its case directly and possibly finalize key issues that lower level channels have struggled to close. So yes, a deal may be announced, but until Trump signs off in his own way, it's wise to treat it as a provisional agreement and not the end of the story.
Right, a very important point to note. So a deal that couldn't be really a final deal. We have to keep close attention to what the changes and the details would be. We'll have to do that. But let's also turn to Japan, Professor Kim. So yesterday, Sanae Takaichi was elected as Japan's new prime minister, and she's widely known as a staunch conservative. How do you think her leadership could impact Seoul-Tokyo relations and also the trilateral cooperation with Washington?
Yes, as you mentioned, her election is very historic. She's Japan's first female prime minister, but her leadership also introduces new uncertainties. Now, at least for now, both leaders appear to be signaling goodwill. Prime Minister Takaichi has responded to concerns about worsening relations by emphasizing her fondness for Korean culture. I think this was mentioned earlier. She says she enjoys Korean food and cosmetics. And by noting the growing importance of Korea-Japan relations, she continues to try to emphasize this. President Jae Myung also wrote on social media in both Korean and Japanese that he looks forward to constructive dialogue with her at the upcoming APEC summit. And working level talks for a potential bilateral meeting are reportedly already underway, though we're not sure at the moment. But beneath this friendly start also lies a degree of risk. Now, the longstanding coalition between the LDP, the Liberal Democratic Party, and Komeito has collapsed after 26 years, and the LDP has instead formed a new coalition with the Japan Innovation Party, Ishin. So unlike Komeito, which it was relatively moderate, Ishin is considerably more conservative. And as a result, Japan's government has effectively shifted from a conservative plus moderate conservative coalition to a conservative plus hardline conservative one. And at the same time, Takaichi herself is known for her nationalist and hawkish position within the LDP. And under her leadership, Japan may see stronger rightward tendencies, possibly including moves towards the formal militarization of the self-defense forces or renewed visits to the Yasukuni Shrine, which are always controversial in Korea especially. So either of these would likely strain bilateral relations with Seoul and could also complicate the broader framework of the U.S.-Japan-Korea security cooperation as well. So right now, the beginning looks cordial, but whether this goodwill can withstand the ideological shift in Tokyo, I think we still need to wait and check and see what happens.
Right, so her stance will definitely bring some new dynamics into the equation. Now, before we conclude, so the Korean and Japanese leaders are expected to meet for the first time in Gyeongju at the APEC. So in line with Seoul's pragmatic approach, what kind of diplomatic tone and strategy should the Lee government take with Japan's new leadership, Professor Millard?
So I think Professor Kim kind of just got it right there. So right now, everyone's saying all these nice things. Takaichi, she's coming to say, oh, she loves Korean food, she uses the cosmetics and so on. In the short term, I definitely agree with Professor Kim. Everything looks rosy. We definitely know over the past 3 years, Japan has had 3 different leaders, and they've pretty much maintained some good momentum. They have maintained some improving relations. So it's very important right now that President Lee maintains this good momentum going through. But as Professor Kim said, we do need to be aware that there are some sort of things happening in the background. So long-term, maintaining this relationship, really that'll be the key. That will really show the pragmatic diplomacy from President Lee.
Right, and we will follow suit on the latest developments moving forward. But as for now, we'll have to conclude our discussion right here. Thank you so much for your insights, Professor Millard.
Thank you very much.
And Professor Kim, of course, we really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.